Hello, my name is Lulu and welcome to yet another spooky video. I am super excited to be watching yet another scary video that you guys submitted. But before we get started, I wanted to ask you once again to send me your spooky videos, your ghost stories or videos. Leave them in the Discord server. You can find the link in the description below. And hey, while you're here, consider subscribing so I can keep the Cafe of Capitalism open forever. I also have a long playlist of spooky reaction videos currently uploaded at 3 times per week. And if you want to be there live to watch me get scared over videos on the internet, check out my stream where I record these with the help of my amazing audience. Now, let's get to the spooks. I'm ready, let's go. Chat, wait, before we get started, so you guys believe in aliens? Chat, do you want to believe? Agent Mulder's, Agent Scully's in my chat. Do you guys believe in aliens? Because while I do believe in aliens, I'm also very afraid. I wish I could unbelieve in aliens. Okay, chat. While the boss fight is ongoing, let's jump right into it. Aliens, yes. Intelligent aliens, unsure. I don't know. Intelligent earthlings, also unsure. This doesn't have a lot of visuals, but I will be pausing and interrupting because you guys know me. I can't shh ever. The thought of humanity being alone or not alone is scary in itself. Either is scary, right? If we're the only people in the universe like that, that's scary. But then it's also scary if we aren't. Okay, Ted, are you ready? The most believable alien encounter. The Skinwalker Ranch story. We got some context from Chad, and I'm excited to see what this is about.
Some call this location the most paranormal location on the planet.
Not just in America, like overall?
Others call this whole thing just a big hoax. But what is undeniably true, and frankly what makes this case so much more interesting, is that unlike the vast majority of paranormal stories and claims, this case was put to an enormous amount of scientific scrutiny. In fact, there was a decade-long study done on this case, where PhDs and scientists converged on this one location and basically around the clock studied, all these claims of the paranormal that was happening in the area.
I wish I was a PhD.
And after a decade of research, the findings are pretty mind-blowing. And the case that I'm referring to is none other than the very famous Skinwalker Ranch.
The sign that says the biohazard thing and then the alien face is spooky. I want that in my living room.
The version of this story is you have a family that purchases a ranch out in Utah, and as soon as they move in, they start noticing some pretty bizarre things around their property. Everything from, some of their livestock going missing or being harmed. They have strange sightings in the woods of creatures and lights in the sky. They eventually report it to the news, and that news story gets picked up by a couple of other outlets, and a billionaire who is obsessed with researching the paranormal sees this story. He buys the property and installs an entire team of scientists and researchers to basically try to figure out what was happening at this ranch. And they spend 10 years studying this ranch. The outcome is, well, turns out some strange things really were happening there. Before we get started, if this type of content appeals to you, the kind of strange, dark, mysterious content delivered in a story format, well, if that appeals to you, that's what my channel's all about. And I post 3 to 4 times a week. So if you would, if that appeals to you, please gently ransack the like button and then turn on all notifications so you can get all of my content.
Go support MrBallen today, chat.
All right, on with the story. In the
there was an alien encounter back in 1899. No.
Plot of land. It's all desert. Where a
wait, that's cool.
Sits.
Where?
Skinwalker Ranch. It was built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it was actually built on a piece of land that had apparently been cursed. Prior to its construction, the Navajo tribe had a feud with the Utes Native American tribe. The Utes were selling off other Native Americans that they would capture.
Texas, 1899?
Whoa! To the United States. And so the Navajo, who had previously lived in the area where this ranch actually was built, they were forced off their land as the Utes came in and were rounding them up and selling them into slavery. And before the Navajo left that area, they cursed the land with what's called the Skinwalker curse. The idea was they were going to torment the Utes tribe for the hardships they had inflicted on the Navajo. The Skinwalker curse, legend has it, is this curse where these witches descend on the area and take the form or wear the skin of various predatory animals in the area, namely large wolves and foxes. They inhabit those bodies and terrorize anybody in the cursed land. At some point, this ranch is actually built on the land that had apparently been cursed. It wasn't until many years later when owners of that ranch started seeing predatory animals doing some very strange things in and around their property that they did some research on the area, learned about this curse, and then before long, the nickname had stuck. In 1994, Terry and Gwen Sherman purchased Skinwalker Ranch. It had actually been abandoned by the previous owners for the last few years, so when they purchased it, they got it for way below market price.
So cheap.
So they're just so excited to be moving in.
Party, good to see you. Welcome in. Welcome.
500 acres to let their cattle free roam. It was like the dream purchase for this family. And so when they finally do move in, like the day they move in, they don't really care that, you know, the grass is overgrown. It looks like things are kind of in disrepair. And in fact, when they go into the homestead, like the actual house on the property, they were so excited about everything that they kind of overlooked some of the strange things that they immediately noticed about the property. You know, they go inside and every window has a deadbolt on it. The inside and outside of every door in the house, not just the doors leading outside, doors leading between rooms had locks, the front and back side. They noticed these big pikes that were driven into the ground at the front door and back door of the property with massive chains.
Wait. I was gonna say like maybe this is like against boars or wildlife, but this is getting excessive.
Off of them, which looked like, you know, pretty powerful guard dogs had been there. They're thinking to themselves, well, this is a huge piece of property. You know, perhaps the previous owners are a little bit paranoid because they're kind of isolated. And so they didn't really raise a red flag when, to be honest, had I moved into a property where every single door and window had multiple locks on it, they had these big guard dogs, I'd probably ask a couple questions. But you know what? Terry and Gwen, they're just so excited about this purchase that, again, they kind of just overlook it. So on the day that they are moving in, Terry and Gwen have some family members over to help them offload trucks and move stuff into the homestead. And it's during this process as they're moving things out of the truck into the house. And again, you got to remember that the house is situated like right in the middle of the property, and you can see in every direction basically unobstructed because it's basically open desert, with the exception of a couple areas that are, you know, basically forests. And as they're offloading some of the stuff into the house, Terry looks out at one of these tree lines and he notices this huge wolf, or what looks like a wolf, pretty well off in the distance, kind of meandering its way over.
That's a big cat. That is a big cat.
It's far enough off that this is
MrBallen
not
a little
enough
before
to be
nap.
totally
Heck
worried
yeah.
about it. After all, I mean, Terry was a rancher and his family were fairly rugged. They carried weapons and they were used to, you know, protecting their livestock from predators. So this was not a, oh my goodness, I can't believe a wolf is near us. It was more like, okay, let's make a note that there's a wolf walking towards us. And so Terry he tells his family, hey guys, just so you know, there's a wolf coming towards us right now. And the whole family is now standing near the truck and they're watching this wolf. And Terry recalled as he's staring out watching this wolf that's kind of almost walking in like a snake, like a serpentine path.
What is it circling
from
there?
Hundreds of yards out. It's still quite a ways out. Terry
Interesting wife
notices
friendship. Would you
that
pet
there
it?
was a fence that was out where this wolf is. And the fence was pretty big, and the spaces between posts were about 6 feet. When he had a good look at the wolf next to the fence, he could tell that the wolf was at least 6 feet long. And he was thinking, oh,
long boy.
Look on me, like that's an enormous wolf. That's the biggest wolf I've ever seen. But the wolf wasn't acting angry or aggressive. It was just kind of skulking its way towards him, very nonchalant, you know, broad daylight. And at some point, you know, Terry and the family, they're standing behind the truck, and Terry said that they all had this feeling that the wolf was not going to harm them. And the wolf got about 100 yards away, and Terry and his family are transfixed. And he even said he didn't understand why they weren't scared or why they weren't, you know, running away or shooting at it or something, but they didn't. All of them are just standing there watching this wolf that's massive. And the wolf is wagging its tail and acting like a domesticated dog. The wolf comes over and goes up near Terry's father, who was there helping unload some of the gear they had. And Terry's father just kind of reflexively reaches out to start petting this. He's petting like up at his head level this massive wolf.
Do they get that big?
The wolf just acts like a domesticated dog and kind of rubs against his hand and then starts walking away from them.
He's
just
petting this walker. Why would you do that?
Anything, not causing them any harm, not snarling, not growling, nothing. But just as nonchalantly as it walked over to them, it walks over to where they had a pen with a couple of cows and calves inside of this pen. And one of the calves had its head through the post that was keeping them in this cage. Just kind of watching this wolf. And the wolf notices it and in an instant jumps over to this calf and immediately has the whole head of the calf in its jaws. Just trying to rip it out of the cage. But it can't get it to squeeze through the cage. And so all of a sudden, you know, like Terry and his family are broken out of this weird trance. And Terry starts firing shots.
That's so scary, gross.
It strikes the wolf and has no impact. They run over, they start hitting
many
it
investigation
with the
teams
back
now
end
that
of the
have
axe.
starts
They're
in
trying to
walk
get this thing
around.
off of the calf because their
Scary.
livestock, that was their livelihood. And you know, these are rugged people, and so they're trying to fight to save their property, to save their cows. And the wolf is just totally unaffected. It's not trying to attack Terry or his son that are trying to get rid of it. The wolf is just trying to attack the cow, but it won't let go. And finally, it just kind of gives up on the calf, starts kind of retreating. Terry ends up getting his rifle, a high-powered rifle, and takes a shot at the wolf one more time. But again, it just has no impact on the wolf. And the wolf just, at some point, just...
Well, if it's enormous.
Turns around and kind of trots off into...
Andres, good morning. Welcome in.
After they kind of were brought out of that initial trance, that they remembered this horrible smell that's like foul, almost chemical smell that just permeated the whole area after the wolf was there. Terry,
when you're full of tapioca pearl.
and his son, they decided to go track this wolf because now there's this massive predator that's going to make owning cattle extremely difficult, and so they would have to go deal with this predator. And so instead of retreating into the house, they grabbed their weapons and they tracked the wolf that's now jogged off into the forest.
Why is he so Why is he so spicy looking?
They make it to an area in the forest where the ground is very muddy and sodden.
Hello
and
there.
Terry
Interesting. Welcome
make out these
in.
footprints that just suddenly stop, and they just couldn't make sense of it. And so they went back to the house and they told their family, like, we tracked it into the woods. There's no blood trail. There's nothing. It just walked in and vanished. So this is day one of being at this ranch, and they're all on edge now. The whole family is on edge. They really don't know what to make of that wolf. The sheer size of it, the fact that it was totally unaffected by being shot multiple times. You know, there's real concern over their own livelihood because they keep cattle and they're only going to have more that are going to be out in these pens. And if there are wolves that are 3 times the size of a normal wolf that are walking around killing cattle, that's a big problem if you own cattle. And so they're on edge, and they're all in a way trying almost not to talk about how crazy and how bizarre that encounter with the wolf was. They're just like, they're treating it like it's just a normal predator problem. Like, man, we gotta get those wolves, we gotta protect our cattle. But in the back of everybody's minds, they're like, something very strange is happening here. Gwen, she was having some other very strange things that were happening to her.
I was in alpha movement.
She was not tying to the wolf thing. She was just noticing a couple of distinct things that were happening to her that made
Is that
her
what you
think
look like,
that
chat?
she actually had a very real,
or is that what I look like?
medical problem. That she had, like, you know, true memory issues. Because 2 things happened. One, in that first week, she had gone to the grocery store, and when she came back, she put the groceries away, and then she left to go to the other room. And when she came back, all the groceries were now back in the bags. And so for like 20 minutes,
was it memory issues, or was it the swalkers?
Did I put the groceries away? Same day, she goes to take a shower, and she hangs her towel in the bathroom like anyone would, and she takes a shower, and then when she gets out, the towel's missing. And she's like, huh. She gets another towel, and she towels off, and then she finds the towel.
Those aliens are creeps. Why are they stealing her towel?
Hanging up in a closet.
Dementia
on
onset?
the other side of the
I don't know.
house.
I'm also very
So between
forgetful,
the
but this would be
groceries and the
scary.
towel, she's like, is there something wrong with me? Am I like having a stroke? Am I having a medical issue here that I'm like literally losing my mind? And it wasn't until Terry actually had a similar experience that she started to wonder if this had to do with maybe that strangeness with the wolf, that maybe there's just something odd happening about this property. And it was Terry, in that first week, he had been digging holes for a new fence. And he had this big fence digging tool. It was about 70 pounds.
What the frick is that? That looks like a bread making machine, but like times 20 in size. Pervy aliens. Why? Snake gets it. Snake gets it. I don't know. Doing science with that towel. What kind of probing they got to do there? Get paranoid when I wake up to the storage room door open because I forgot to close them. I also have to close my closet doors or I get too spooked.
Fence, and so he had taken
a break. Does anybody in chat sleep with their doors open at all?
Left his fence digging tool, you know, at the last place he had dug a post, and he went in to grab a bite to eat, came back out, and his fence digger is missing. And initially, he just goes into the house and he's like, hey, you know, to his wife, to his kids, like, did you guys move my fence digger? Like, do you know what happened to it? Like, where is it? It's not out there. And they're like, no, we've been in the house the whole time. I have no idea. And so they couldn't find it. And a week goes by, and he's out patrolling his property looking for wolves. And in the tree, like well away from where he had been digging the post before, in the tree, his fence digging tool that's 70 pounds is like 70 feet in the air, strung up in this tree. So Terry comes back to the house.
That thing looks heavy though, how?
The fence digging tool being in the tree. And that's when Gwen
Window
tells
shades
Terry
down.
about
This,
her
heck yeah.
experiences with the groceries going back in the bag and a towel being moved
I never leave my
around the
room
house.
so unlocked.
And
Same,
everybody
Kirisaki,
starts to
same.
Everybody in the family starts to really
Yeah. Wait. Who else in chat has like a lock at the inside of their bedroom door? Because I got one of those too. That is way too spooky to sleep without the door locked. I get that.
being scared. We can't explain what's happening on this property, and we're very isolated. And what's the deal with all these locks on all the doors? I mean, they're starting to feel really concerned. Following the fence digging tool being found, Terry started to notice lights on his property. Initially, because this was the first couple of weeks they're there, he would see lights way at the far end of his property that looked like headlights, and he would think someone must have made a wrong turn that wound up on my property, and we were kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and they'll just leave. And so when he first started seeing these lights, that's what he assumed it was, just people making a wrong turn. But he started to see it so often that he wondered if people were illegally hunting on his property. And so one night he sees these lights on his property and he goes out to investigate. In fact, he's angry. You know, he's had all these strange things happen. His family's on edge, you know, and now he's mad and he's going to take it out on this person who's illegally hunting on his property. And he starts charging out to these lights, and he starts getting closer and closer, and he starts to realize it's not making any sound. If this was like a truck, it's not making any sound. And we're in an area where I could totally hear that if it was a vehicle, and he can't hear anything.
Yeah, how did somebody just get out there into the middle of nowhere? Because it was really remote, right?
And then float up into the sky and disappear. And Terry's like, what is going on here? The winter rolls around, and it's a particularly brutal winter. And one night, he couldn't account for one of his cows. And so he's out looking for this one stray cow, and he searches this whole property, and there's only one area that he hasn't searched, and it's that forest where that giant wolf had disappeared after marching in there, and they tracked it in there. And so he goes in there, and as soon as he gets to the tree line, he notices there's a bunch of footprints from what looks like a cow. He's relieved because it's probably his. He follows it into the woods, and much like
now with like electric trucks maybe, but back then
wolf that had just disappeared in that muddy
there's a bad vibe or curse on the ranch.
In the same spot, the footprints that appeared to be this cow had also just disappeared. And then over the course of the remainder of the winter, that would happen 4 more times. The animals would run away and just disappear without a trace. By the end of the winter, after all these animals have just mysteriously disappeared, Terry and his family, but Terry in particular, has really gone into full paranoia mode. He, at night, would just like stalk his own property, like hiding behind bushes with his weapon, and like hope to see what was taking his cattle. And so one night, as he's doing another fruitless search around his property, he catches out of his periphery what looks like a kind of mass of something moving around in the trees.
It's silence into the exhaust.
And at this point, he was kind of obscured by some shrubs and some plants. And so he kind of crouched down and looked out at the tree line. And he sees in the tree line this like strange shape kind of moving about inside of the trees. And he would describe the mass as looking almost like a stealth fighter jet, but really small. And it was making no sound, and it was hovering about 20 feet off the ground. And he's crouched down, not making a sound, watching it. And it's just kind of like moving around the tree line. And it has these lights that it looks to be kind of scanning the ground. And it's just kind of moving around. It's shining these lights, these multicolored lights in the ground. And Terry moves a tiny bit to get a better angle on this thing. And he makes the tiniest of noises against the brush, just like a tiny little, barely audible sound. And this mass that's pretty far away, the lights immediately turn off, and it angles itself so it's facing directly at Terry. And Terry can feel it right away that it's heard this tiny little sound he's made, and now it's staring directly at Terry. And Terry's like terrified, and he's looking at this
terrified.
Thing, oh my God, like, take me. Like, what is this? Is this the thing that's been taking my livestock?
Yeah, it's about Skinwalker and Snake.
And he's staring at it.
The channel's called MrBallen.
By the spring of 1995, things have gotten really, really bad for Terry and his family. Now, not only are they losing livestock inexplicably, but they're showing up. The actual cows themselves are showing up back on their property, hours or days later, just kind of in random locations on the property, and they look like they've had surgery done, like precision cuts, and pieces of them are missing. And in addition, some very strange things are happening at the house. At night, they would see these entities walking around their property, these humanoid, they described them as having no expression, just walking around their property. And sometimes they would walk right up to the glass, put their hands on the glass and look in, but there was no face. And like Terry and his family, they had blinds down, and they would use the deadbolts on every single door and window, but they could hear them rapping at the glass, and they could hear them communicating in a language they didn't understand right outside of their house. And this became so regular that it was almost impossible to sleep. Terry's kids started performing very poorly in school because they weren't sleeping. Terry's wife, Gwen, she lost her job at the bank because she wasn't sleeping, and she was like delusional.
Sleep deprivation is terrible. Sleep deprivation is the worst. Oh, chat, am I lagging again? Hold up. Please no.
They were all just at an absolute breaking point. Terry is now feeling
the aliens are in my computer!
He's sitting on his porch with his rifle, and he notices out on the horizon a new phenomenon. He was used to seeing the lights on his property that would be off in the distance that would disappear, and he had previously seen that kind of like fighter jet
agree on that.
Scanning the area. Like, those were two types of lights he would see.
I'd buy the ranch just because.
As he's sitting on his porch, it was almost like this orangey orb that appeared off in the distance. Since he had his rifle with a high-powered scope on it, he just lifts up his rifle and he looks through his high-powered scope, and he zooms in all the way, and he can see that this orb, he describes it as a portal. That as he's looking at it, it has almost like an oval shape to it, and even though it was nighttime, in the middle of the orange orb is this blue sky. It's as if he's looking through a portal into another world where it's broad daylight and there's a sky. And he doesn't know what to make of it, but he can see that a black figure is crawling out of this portal into his property, and it looks just like the black entities that were basically walking around his property at night. In addition to these figures that are crawling, like imagine that scene from The Ring where the girl crawls out of the well. They're crawling out of this portal into his property and then scurrying away into the tree line. And he sees weird craft as well coming into his property through this portal, and then the portal shuts and disappears. Following this night with the orange portal, Terry started to notice blue orbs that he and his family would say were the worst and most terrifying thing of all of the things they experienced. And considering they had tall, featureless black humanoids peering in their windows and rapping on their windows, that's saying something. Okay, so a blue
Oh,
orb
okay,
started
the
showing
orbs
up
are
on the
even
property.
scarier.
And
Could it just have been like torch lights, like torches?
the way they described it, Terry and his family, was whenever the orb came near you, it gave you this extreme sense of anxiety. It was almost like it was emitting this feeling that you automatically got, where suddenly you were unbelievably anxious and terrified of the blue orb. And then as soon as it left, you would, not be anxious anymore. And so one night, he's sitting on his porch like he had begun doing, and he sees this orb show up on his property. And his 3 dogs are sitting with him that see the orb, and they start growling and barking. And so he lets his dogs go, thinking that maybe they can scare this
Orbs,
thing
blorbs,
off.
morbs,
And the
marbles on
dogs
steel.
take off running towards this blue orb. And they chase it, and you can see the orb, Terry can see the orb that starts to kind of retreat. And he's thinking, oh my goodness, I finally won something. My attack dogs are gonna scare this orb away. And they chase off into the woods, and he sees this thing, the blue orb, retreat into the woods. And then when he's thinking again that finally a little victory for us, he hears his dogs yelping, and he's too terrified to go check it out. And
No!
So he ends up going inside and locking the doors, locking the windows like they had
But
been, and
his
just kind of retreating.
dogs!
So the next day, when the dogs haven't returned, Terry and his son, they go out looking
This is the most upsetting part so far. I would go out and sacrifice myself for my dogs. No freaking way.
for the dogs.
He
in
just
the
left
forest.
them.
When they get out there, they get to a clearing, and they find 3 stacks of ashes in like little burned out circles, as if there had been a fire previously in these 3 little spots. And it turned out it was the ashes of his 3 dogs that had gone into the woods. They had just been vaporized. Terry decides that it's time to leave, and he wants to sell.
Well, now he
the
didn't
ranch.
even
And so he
save
puts
them.
the property up for sale and goes to a local news outlet, and he tells them about what's happening on his property. And as fate would have it, a billionaire by the name of Robert Bigelow, who had invested
What a name.
millions of dollars in standing up this scientific research team, this all-star team of PhDs, specifically to research what he described as high strangeness, which really is just paranormal. Basically, he was obsessed with the paranormal and wanted to
I wonder if you can get a
investigate
PhD in
paranormal.
like
And he had actually
ufology.
seen that fairly obscure story. When
Cryptozoology.
he saw that it was up for sale, Robert Bigelow, the billionaire, saw this great opportunity to buy the piece of property and actually make it the headquarters of his
Was so risky,
own
Lulu. He wasn't gonna
scientific
risk it.
research.
I'm sorry. I would save my cats, my dogs, anything from aliens, or I would at least try or despawn trying. Never in my life, ever, bro. No. No. When my cat needed surgery last year, I was thinking about selling my Lulu model, even though this is my livelihood. Do not. I will get pulverized so Angelo can keep running.
Team, not only to investigate what was happening on Skinwalker Ranch, but use it as kind of a hub to do other scientific research. So he purchases the
I'd
ranch.
sacrifice myself to
And
save my
Terry
dogs.
Actually,
But I would let
even
that
though
happen.
He did not want to
Sale.
spend any time at the ranch, on some level wanted to know what the research was going to show, because he was very curious, like, what is going on at this ranch that's been plaguing my family. So he offers to stay on as kind of like the ranch manager, because Robert Bigelow and his team are a bunch of scientists and business people. They don't have any experience on the ranch, and so they're happy to keep him. So Terry is still connected to the ranch, but at this point he's sold it to Robert Bigelow.
But he doesn't
So
live
Robert
there anymore.
Bigelow's
I hope.
scientific team
What
was
a
called
name.
the National Institute for Discovery Science, or
That's more secret than
NIDS,
people on Lulu's
NIDS,
side. Right.
NIDS for short. And Bigelow had actually built the team before purchasing Skinwalker
I remember the
Ranch.
ranch has gained the
And
nickname
what he went
High
out and did is he recruited
Strangeness.
some of the most incredible
Oh, that's
scientists
cool.
and PhDs he could possibly recruit.
That's a cool
But
title.
he didn't want people that were interested in the paranormal. He wanted people that were inherently skeptical, so that if he was ever
Okay,
able to
if he was faking it though, if he was doing it for attention, this would be a redacted move. Cause why would you want your theory to be disproven? You feel me, chat? Why bring in only
prove the
scientists then?
existence of high strangeness,
Spent my life
that
savings
he
to
would
save
have
my two cats.
credibility in doing
Oh,
that. And so he
sadly.
went out and found these
Valkyries, I'm
incredibly
so
skeptical,
sorry.
incredibly smart scientists and PhDs. And so they move into Skinwalker
Would have done
Ranch.
anything possible.
And the first thing they do is they need to start doing testing to make sure that this whole all the stories about Skinwalker Ranch coming from Terry and his family were not just some grand illusion by the family that, you know, they could have just made it up. And so they get in there and they start running these tests. So that first year, as they're running these tests, which are largely things like, okay, let's check the environment and see if there aren't any...
It's true. Went to lemonade stand once, went joined by kids, and hey, they said, "Hey, you got any grapes?" They pulled out grapes, saying they were prepared for that situation. Sprigatito, is that the duck went to the lemonade stand? Are you the duck?
You know, plants that are giving off spores that could be
reliability
hallucinogenic that they're breathing in. Let's check their water
from
supply
the scientist
and make sure there wasn't something happening in their water supply. Let's do psychological assessments of the family. Let's ask neighbors. Let's do all of...
If you were faking it for attention, first of all, who would moiter their dogs? Full stop. Second of all, why would you go through psychological testing? That sheep is so hard to fake. This is very scary because I'm starting to believe it more and more.
And over that first year, while they're doing this research, there isn't much activity at the ranch, save a couple of instances where there were some strange lights. So that first year is fairly uneventful, but what's important is that the NIDS researchers come to a conclusion that this did not seem like a hallucination. This did not seem like a something coming from, you know, a plant or water supply. This seemed like the Terry and his family were really experiencing something odd. They just didn't know what it was. One day, Terry and actually Gwen, who was helping him, were tagging some of the new calves, the new cows that had been born, putting these little tags in their ears. And so Gwen was there helping, and so
little
Terry
piercing
and Gwen
hours.
tagged this new calf, put
Yoink.
a yellow tag in its ear, and they move on, and they're tagging other animals. And so for about 40 minutes, their eyes and their attention are not focused on this one calf or that one area of...
So here's the thing though, I love that they sold it, but you can also not just get rid of your entire livestock. If this was a fairly big farm, I'm glad they got to keep like all their animals and stuff, but for them to like just go and move on would have also been really hard. The wife didn't have a job anymore at this point. You got 9 quadrillion livestock, you can't just immediately sell off for meat. Do we have spooks today, or did I already miss it? Mask, there will be more spooks after again, so don't worry, we're full of spooks today.
The ranch, they're tagging other animals, and then their dog that was with them starts growling and reacting in the direction of where this calf had been. And so Terry and Gwen turn around and they look and they
welcome in.
They start walking over. They find the calf that they had tagged about 40 minutes ago has been basically surgically dissected, and all that's left are its legs and its head. And in addition, the ear where that tag was had been removed. And so they immediately call over the NIDS researchers. So the NIDS veterinarian comes over and looks at the scene and just can't make sense of it, because the incisions on the calf were so well done that it looked like someone with real surgical expertise had done this on an operating table. There was no sign that this was done by a...
Yeah, so nobody could have just shown up and done this for sheeps and giggles.
And there was no blood anywhere. So this prompts a massive search of the property, because in many ways, this is what the NIDS researchers are looking for, are real occurrences of something that is highly strange that they can go investigate. And so all of the researchers and everybody there begins searching the property for whoever was responsible for this dissection of the cow. And they start searching the property, and the dogs, they had all these guard dogs that were kept at each of these observation posts that they had set up around the ranch as soon as the NIDS team had moved in. They were all looking in the same direction, all 4 of these 4 observation posts. And they're all cowering in the back of their cages, all looking in the same direction. And so they start making their way towards the tree line where all these dogs are looking, and they stop short when Terry says, "I see something in the tree." So they stop their car and they're looking, and in the tree is this massive wolf, this like wolf-like humanoid that's...
I know we're like on a spooky story, but this looks like the that one meme of the wolf crying sitting next to the tree with the sparkle edits.
Basically perched on a tree limb. And Terry
by the
takes
same
out his
artist?
rifle and he aims at the creature up in the tree, this huge creature, and everybody sees it. All the NIDS researchers are looking at this creature, and they're like, "Oh my God, what is that?" Terry starts firing at this thing, and it just disappears into the woods. And so the team charges into the woods. They fan out, and they pick up a couple of tracks of this huge thing that has like this massive footprint with these huge claws, but much like the wolf that had disappeared and the cattle that had suddenly disappeared when they went into the woods, they couldn't find any traces of this thing. But they did smell this horrible stench that Terry remembered smelling. It stuck with him that first day when that large wolf had come over on the very first day they were moving in. It was that same smell, but they couldn't find this huge animal. So dumbfounded, the NIDS researchers just go back to the property and no one can make sense of it. And they have the footprint and they have their own eyewitness testimony, but like they couldn't make sense of how something that big could just get away. And so over the following month, they're like searching the property and they're looking for any more signs of this huge creature or anything. The only thing they noticed is that the guard dogs consistently stayed in their kennels and did not want to come out. They were acting like they were kind of being hunted. And they were very they were cowering quite a bit, and they were scared to go out in the open, but they couldn't find it.
Why does he smell like that? He's full of Axe body spray.
Terry and Gwen are kind of back to doing work around the ranch.
And research is a high-risk, high-reward scenario.
One section of the ranch, and they pass by the corral where 4 of their prized bulls were. These are very expensive animals that are all in this enclosure. And so they drive past and they take a mental note that they're seeing these bulls in this enclosure. And they drive off to the other side of the ranch where they're doing some work, tagging animals and, building fences, whatever it is they were doing. But when they come back and they round a corner where they're first able to see that corral of bulls again, they are like, where are they? Because the bulls were not in their enclosure and they weren't anywhere. And so they're panicked because these are very expensive animals, and they run over, and Terry sees that the gates to the corral are still locked.
Thank you. How did it turn out?
There's no sign of a struggle or anything. And it just so happens that right next to the corral was this fairly small trailer that hadn't been used in years. In fact, it was literally wired shut. It was just sitting there. And Terry, just for whatever reason, runs over and looks in one of the windows.
Up to this point, I was on with the aliens. What if it was just people out there in the middle of nowhere, like Breaking Bad style, making drugs? And the fumes, I don't know. The trailer is kind of creepy as heck.
And inside of this tiny enclosure are these 4 bulls, completely calm, all crammed into this tiny trailer. They could barely fit. They're not fighting with each other or anything. They're just calmly
Someone is trying to steal them?
As if they're in some kind of a trance. And Terry yells to Gwen, like, hey, they're over here. They're right here. And it like startles the bulls out of their trance. They start panicking and kicking, and they end up getting them out of this enclosure, and it takes them hours to finally round them up and get them back in the corral. But
Rancher, we must cook, said this walker.
It is almost impossible to get even one bull into that small.
There was a show about this?
It would take hours to maybe be successful at doing that. To get 4 bulls into that enclosure was pretty much impossible. And to do it when they basically were calm after they were in there is also somewhat impossible. And it was important to note that Terry saw when he looked in the window that the only entrance to that trailer was wired shut still. It had not been undone. In fact, the cobwebs at the corner where the opening basically formed with the sides of the trailer, they were still intact, like it had not opened. And it made no sense how those bulls got in there. So the NIDS researchers come over and they can't make sense of it either. Upon further investigation, the NIDS researchers found that the bars of the corral that held the bulls, a section of it had been highly magnetized. And so while they're doing this research, trying to figure out if magnetic fields has anything to do with the strange occurrences at the ranch, 2 of the NIDS researchers were on the outskirts of the property.
It was on Discovery Channel, just reality TV.
And they started smelling, they both reported smelling that horrible metallic, like rotting smell that other people had reported smelling anytime they saw that large wolf creature. And when they started smelling it, their compass started to flitter and then pointed away from north towards wherever the smell was. And they remember thinking that they felt like they were being watched. And it went on for a few moments.
Oh, that's
the compass
spooky.
Didn't waver. It was aimed in the direction
The compass
of the smell.
breaking is really
Both on
scary.
opposite sides pointing in the same direction. And then at some point, the smell stops and they stop feeling anxious, and the north arrows go back to the way they should have been. And then
How do you explain that though? Like a compass malfunctioning? How?
one of the most terrifying of all of the paranormal occurrences that happened at Skinwalker Ranch happened at the very end of 1997. Two NIDS researchers were up on a ridgeline overlooking the homestead. Every night it became commonplace to basically position NIDS researchers all over the property to basically be on the lookout for weird things that are happening. And these two researchers are up on this ridge, kind of obscured and hidden, and they see this orange orb take shape right near the homestead. And one of them had an infrared goggles, and so he looks down at the orb, and he can clearly make out that it's
compass failing is actually not that hard. Just high electromagnetic field.
An awful lot like what Terry
How do you make one of those?
Saw that
this is north now.
Creature crawling out of the portal into his property. Well, these two researchers are looking at this portal, and they see the same thing. They see this black human-like creature crawling out of this orange portal onto the ground, and then it starts running up the hill towards them. And they're like frozen with fear.
Oh, it's that picture.
Rotting metallic smell as this big human.
It's moldy, Greg. Chat. It's moldy, Greg, from the SCP collection. It's the rain.
Like creature bounds up the mountain, and they can hear the shale under its
scary.
Feet as it runs up, and it goes right past them, about 30 feet away from them. They're looking at it, and it just barrels past.
Wait,
them
the rake is a creepypasta, right?
The following year, in 1998, the activity on the ranch declined significantly. All they had was the occasional strange lights here and there, but for the most part, it was done. And in fact, even though NIDS remained on the property,
are they still there today?
2004, the research just wasn't amounting to anything, so they.
The creature looks like it's about to ask if you got any games on your phone. A ton of big electronics with weak shielding. Old homes are known to have old wiring, so high EMF, which can cause people to feel paranoid and hallucinate. Wait, EMFs can do that to you? From like older buildings? Is that real? There are spots that have magnetic anomalies around the globe, even on land that are just like the Bermuda Triangle. That was one on the Skinwalker Ranch too. What? It has been so long. Mohammed, good to see you. Welcome in. This behavior kind of sounds like the Until Dawn. Oh, sheep. Some people are sensitive to EMF. How do you find out if you are?
Footage of a number of the lights that were seen.
That's so
but
scary.
Again, no one's gonna take a picture of some random lights and say, "Oh, there you go, proof." You know, they demonstrated that there were magnetic fields, and they have images of these calves that would reappear after looking like they'd had surgery done to them. They had hundreds of eyewitness reports. They have all this information, but none of it was really definitive proof, which was very frustrating to Robert Bigelow, to Terry and his family. And the way they described it is they felt like they were dealing with an entity or a group of entities that were just consistently one step ahead of them, that they could catch glimpses of what they were doing, but it was never enough to really understand what was happening. They never felt like they were in control. It was always clear that this entity or these entities were in control of the situation, and they never were in a good position to really record hard data or get good footage.
Man.
Not to mention, this is 1998, this is the late 90s. No one just had an iPhone they can pull out and snap pictures. You had real cameras. And so the best they could do was some pictures of light and some of the animals that had been mutilated. There's been numerous books put together by some of the people that were a part of this NIDS research team, and to this day they believe that what they saw was a result of some paranormal activity. And to this day, many people believe that this is one of the most credible instances of paranormal activity occurring. So I'd love to hear what you think in the comments, whether you think this is a total fact or a total hoax or somewhere in the middle. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can message me on Instagram. My handle is JohnBallen416. Also, I post quite a bit on TikTok. My handle is MrBallen. And that's going to do it, guys. I hope you got something out of this. And until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.
Chat, what do you think? Real or elaborate hoax, you decide. Personally, I'm believing this one. Whether it's electromagnetic fields or actual alien sightings or swalkers, I think this one is too scary. And there's too many people involved to call it fake. Thank you guys again so much for watching my spooky react video. As always, you can find previous videos in the playlist and even more over here on the YouTube channel. See you in the next one. Bye bye.